Andy, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good, Josh. How you?
Not too bad. You had a big weekend here with your race. You're feeling good?
I'm feeling good. Yeah, quads are still a little bit sore, but I think I could run today. So, the race was 4 days ago, and yeah, today's the first day that I feel pretty much back to normal.
Yeah, that's awesome. So for listeners, Andy did a 50-mile race down in Ithaca with 10,000 feet of climbing on Saturday. And we're recording this on Wednesday, and he's back to being able to run almost. So it's pretty awesome.
Yep, yep. Back to almost fully recovered, finally.
Yeah, it's great. So today, you and I are going to discuss foundational strength and health tips for kids.
Mhm.
We chose ages 6 to 14.
Yeah.
Obviously you can expand on that for most people and kids. But yeah, we're gonna dive into two sections: strength tips and health tips. And the reason behind this podcast, and you and I dive into these basically based on demand, right?
Mhm.
Like questions we're getting, patterns we're seeing at the facility. But you and I have seen, like, over the last 15 years, working with different clients, kids that we've trained that are now adults or
Yep.
young adults, and the effectiveness of building foundational strength and good health as a kid and how it translates to an adult.
Mhm.
We've also had a lot of questions from parents over the years,
Yeah.
what do I do for this and that? We're going to address a lot of that today. And then you and I have talked about this basically since we've met each other quite a while ago, on how important it is as a kid to build a level of strength and proper health young, and how it
Mhm.
makes adult life much easier, right?
Yeah.
Like you and I, and again, I give my parents credit, like getting me outside and doing things and playing and sports. Like, um, you know, you and I could take time off, 6 months, a year,
Mhm.
and hold our own physically
Yep.
still, and that's not because we're gifted. It's because we have built, since we were in middle school, a base
Mhm.
that, even if that base narrows now at 42 years old, it's still pretty wide.
Yep.
So you want to
Yeah,
say
I think a
anything on
lot of
that, Andy,
people
before?
I think sometimes a lot of people get into fitness a little too late in life. There's so much that is developed when you're a little kid. And that foundation, like you said, carries with you your whole life. And it's not just the strength and stuff. It's the motor control, like the body awareness, the coordination that you develop as a little kid. If you're active,
Hmm.
that makes exercising later on in life a lot easier. If you do pick up going to the gym when you're 30 years old, if you played a lot as a kid, you're going to find out that you learn exercises quickly and are able to do them well. If you weren't very active as a child and you didn't develop all that coordination and motor skills and whatnot, body awareness, it's very hard to learn exercises when you get older. That stuff
Yeah.
is learned young.
You and I see this
Yeah.
daily. you know,
Oh
there's a
yeah.
there's a dramatic difference at all ages based on people's backgrounds,
Yeah. And I want something you said I liked was when you said that you gave your parents credit for it, because that's going to be a big theme of this. To the parents out there listening, like, as kids, you don't know how important it is to be active. You don't know how good this is for you and how much it's going to help you later on in life. We're both really lucky that we had parents that had us go outside and play, go ride your bikes,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful day. Get off the TV, get out there,
Yep.
signed us up, took us to sports like soccer and basketball and whatnot. We're in pretty good shape now as adults, but we have to give all the credit to our parents because we weren't
Yeah.
planning that when we were 8 years old.
Oh yeah.
We
Yeah.
just, the parents
Hmm.
make all the difference in the world here. So
Hmm.
hopefully they take a lot from this episode.
The Co-Movement Gym podcast is supported by Native Path Supplements and Lombardi Chiropractic. Mention this podcast or click on the links in the episode description for a nice discount on us. Yeah, and you and I had we're the generation, we're unique in that we spent exactly at this point half our life without much tech, if at
Mhm.
all,
Yep.
and now half our life fully immersed into the matrix, right?
Yep.
So like uh it's different now for kids. Obviously, like we didn't have, like we had like three channels on TV. no internet, and you either played with like wooden blocks in your living room and Legos, or you went outside, like, right? So our childhood is much different from the kids now, let alone the kids 20 years from now, but these principles that we're going to lay out, I feel, are timeless, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, the human body isn't going to change that much in a short period of time. So, all right, let's start off with strength. You kick it off, Andy. What do you got here for a recommendation slash tip here for strength here?
Um, I think we have kind of different notes. So let's see, where would I want to begin? We're talking about kids age, like elementary school age for the most part, up into middle school age. Usually after that is when you start getting into sports and you start doing a little more like structured training, personal trainer, sport practice, that kind of thing. As a young kid, especially the really young ones, if we're talking like age 5, 6, 7, something like that, I think unstructured play and um, games, that kind of thing, as opposed to actual strength training, is the place to start when they're really, really young. Um, so when you do unstructured play and games and stuff, what I want to see little kids doing, as opposed to like lifting weights or whatever, I'd like to see little kids running, jumping, hopping, skipping, throwing, crawling, rolling, that kind of thing. Um, I don't know where you want to go with this. I'll let you
Mhm.
play off that and we'll see where we go.
Well, my first one on my list of notes here is play.
Yeah, okay.
And so I think about my childhood, and you nailed it, like with the patterns and unstructured play, but like building forts, riding bikes, hiking, backyard sports. I think there's
Mhm.
a lot of like, your one group of friends versus the other, and there's sort of rules, but not really. Sometimes you get into a tussle, which is always cool. And that
Mhm.
sometimes, like, there's a lot of development there.
Yep, yep,
You don't have
and
the right gear, like you're in the rain and the mud.
yep.
We had a lot of that growing up.
Yeah, I like what you said with like backyard sports as opposed
Yeah.
to say signing them up for
Yes.
structured sports.
Yeah.
Because kids, when they play in the backyard, and this is what we did, you make up your own games. You
Yeah.
make up your own, I mean, first of all, you don't have like an actual standardized field with a real goal or something. So the game becomes who can kick the soccer ball against that tree or that rock.
Hmm.
Or you just come up with something totally different that isn't even a sport. And that's a really good thing for kids, is to make up their own rules. It keeps them really interested, for one thing. It's great for the creative component with their mind and stuff like that. But I would love to see kids doing more, just playing in the backyard. It could be with a soccer ball or football or whatever, but they're kind of like making up their own rules to it and stuff like that. I think that's really good for kids.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, Asher and I do that all the time. We're practicing, quote unquote, but I'm making it into like unique games and rules and competition and this and that. And it keeps them stimulated.
Yep.
But on the back side of it, like I'm, trying to develop something, or,
Yeah.
but with the kids, playing with the kids, yeah, there's a lot of great things there.
I mean,
Climbing trees. Yeah,
I used to
go ahead.
remember playing with my dad. We'd get the soccer ball out in the yard, but we didn't play soccer. We played keep away.
Yeah,
I was dribbling the ball around. He was just trying to poke it away from me, and we could do that for hours. That was
yeah,
a game.
yeah, totally. Climbing trees.
Yep.
I know a bunch of parents probably just, were like, no, like for real. There's a lot of development with climbing. You don't have to be going 30 feet in the air, but like kids love to play on branches and pull themselves up and go from limb to limb and balance. Like I just did this. I did something probably not real smart last weekend, but I hung a tree stand. It was a really, really hard set. And halfway up an 18-foot ladder,
Mhm.
something happened and the tree stand got jammed, and I had to climb over to the neighboring tree onto a branch.
Mhm.
And so I'm hanging with my left arm off the branch, my left leg on the branch, my right leg on the ladder stand that's not attached to the tree, and I'm floating. And I had to reach with a clipper, like a saw, to cut a branch. All of this while I'm balancing and not falling, right? Like,
Yep.
but there's a skill set there.
Mhm.
I don't recommend that particular situation, but let kids climb,
Yeah, you don't recommend
Um,
that situation, but if you did a bunch of climbing trees and stuff as a kid, if you get into that situation as an adult, you can handle it, and you
Oh, it
did
was
just fine.
awesome. It was a
Yep.
fun challenge for me, and I felt confident that even if my foot slipped, my left arm, I would hold myself, right, and vice versa.
Mhm.
So no, that was a
So
good
yeah,
challenge.
you mentioned climbing. I've got a list of like great things to work on for kids. So as they come up, I'll just go with you on this because one of my
Yeah.
things was climbing and hanging, and I was thinking like climbing trees, like you already mentioned, climbing fences, climbing up and over rocks, climbing a rope, and jungle gyms. Like I love monkey bars, like
Hmm.
swinging and hanging from monkey bars, swinging from ring to ring, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Climbing and hanging and just moving around with your upper body like that is something that I'd love to see a lot more kids do. That's really useful. And
Hmm.
we know how important hanging is as adults and how many people struggle to do it. So do it as much as you can as a kid. And kids
Yeah.
love it. When kids come into our gym, the first thing they do is run over to the gymnastics rings and just
Yep.
start swinging around.
That's so true. And then what do their parents do? Most of them yell at them.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, don't yell at them. Like, we're okay. Yeah. And it's funny because kids that hang a lot playing are excellent at hanging. I'm
Hmm.
fascinated to see elementary kids that hang frequently, like hang for like long periods of time. They're easily getting 90 seconds, 75 seconds. They're hanging,
And
and
it builds
it's
a lot of
impressive.
confidence with all those hanging and pulling movements too, because kids are way better at hanging and doing like pull-ups and chin-ups than adults are.
Hmm.
It's a body weight exercise, and kids weigh so little. It's not shocking to see a kid in fifth grade do 10 pull-ups or whatever. You can see that a lot, elementary
Yeah.
school kids. But then by the time they get to high school, they can't do as many, or as adults, it's far more difficult. So I like seeing kids hanging and swinging and maybe even doing a pull up or something like that and realizing that they can do this
Yeah.
early on in life and they get that ingrained in their mind that this is something I can do. Because adults who come into our gym and who've never done a chin up before, it's a really tough goal to reach for a lot of them, and they want to. But man, if you can get that confidence and realize you can do it early in life, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Monkey bars too. I just thought of that.
Yep.
Monkey bars are great. And then the last thing I have for the first section here, I guess, for play is building stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I don't mean like, square walls and like perfect tree forts and stuff. I just mean like build stuff. As a kid, we cut down tons of stuff, branches and trees, and moved rocks and like bale twine, like, as a young kid.
Hmm.
And we were always building some make believe fort, like, and or a like shelters and walls, holes.
Hmm.
um I don't know where to go with that, but like, building stuff is exercise and physical development for
Yep.
sure.
And the creativity, all that kind of stuff. You're engaged in an activity that you can see something that you've completed at the end. That's all
Yes.
great for kids. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're lifting things, you're trying to find stuff. Remember building tree forts and you're like walking around the woods trying to find the right log or the right rock that'll fit into your fort, wherever you need. So
Hmm.
you're kind of hunting and gathering. You're going out, getting supplies, bringing them back, building this little tree fort. I loved, and I know you did too, building dams in streams and
Oh
creeks when you were a
yeah,
kid. Like, and how
love
great is
that.
that? The kid is out there, walk around usually barefoot through this stream, which is great. Good for developing coordination and learning how to walk on unstable surfaces. And then they're carrying these rocks. I mean, it's
Yeah.
manual labor, and we're having the time of our life doing it.
Dude, I totally forgot about dams.
Yep.
My best friend growing up, Will Cotter, we were obsessed with building those because we had a creek.
Yep. We did too.
And oh my gosh, we would take a 4 foot wide creek and make that thing 12 foot wide and 3 feet deep.
Yep. Yep.
And about 3 hours of piling rocks and logs and dirt. And then after all that was done, all we wanted to do was stand on the bank and jump in.
Yep. Yeah, it's so good for you. And now you're out in nature too, fresh air and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, cool. Man, bringing back the memories. Damn. All right, number 2. Develop this is for it's for this ages 6 to 14. You can expand on it, I guess, either way, but like develop individual lifelong sports versus just team sports. Okay.
Oh, good one. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So what I mean, I'm sure people know, but like I think there's a huge value on individual sports when it's all on you
Hmm.
as opposed to the other 10 players on the field, right?
Hmm.
Um I love team sports and I played team sports, big fan of it. I'm now even more now knowing what I know, I'm more of a fan of individual sports. I think there's tremendous development there.
Hmm.
But like tumbling, gymnastics, swimming, biking, cross country, tennis, track and field, rock climbing, wrestling, dirt biking, surfing, rowing,
Hmm.
all of those sports um just killer workout and it's all on you, right? So like
Yep.
if you suck, then the result sucks and it's you got to correct something, right? As opposed to blaming it on the pitcher
Hmm.
or the defenseman in soccer, so I think there's a lot of character building there.
Yeah,
And yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that, yeah, with the individual sports, one of the big benefits is that yeah, you can't be the wallflower. With team
Yeah.
sports, some kids excel, and they're the ones that you see just running all over the place and controlling 95% of the game or whatever, and that's great. They found their niche and they're good at that sport. But then there's also like 20% of the kids that just kind of are standing on the sidelines
Yeah.
watching the better player, take control of the game or whatever. Like you said, with the individual sports, you're just always doing it. You're always
Yeah.
active. Yep. That was a good one.
And I'm going to take a flyer on this. It's just a hypothesis. You can tell me what you think. But like, if you were to take the sports I just listed and you put them in a pool, like a team, okay, you have your team, your A team. Your A team would be your individual sport athletes. And then you take a pool of average team sport athletes and we put them through a fitness, well rounded, balanced fitness competition of
Mm-hmm.
all domains. It'd be interesting to see what happened with that. I don't my and this is just a prediction.
Mm-hmm.
I would put a little bit of money on the individual side. Um Again, it depends obviously who you're choosing, right? I'm
Very
talking
much. Yeah,
random
kids are so varied from one to the next.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But random selections for all.
Mm-hmm.
You could take outliers out, right, on both ends of the spectrum. It's just a guess, but I do. That's how strongly I believe in the development of a lot of these individual sports. So, yeah,
Yeah, I think the important thing is just how active is your kid and how much are they participating. So
yeah,
if you've got a kid who only plays team sports, but they're one of the better athletes, and they're always, like I said, the one running around controlling the game. That
sure,
little Billy is the star soccer player in the
yep,
fall, and then he's the star basketball player in the winter, and then you know, um, he's going to develop great and crush in that that fitness test that you mentioned. But then
yes,
one of the wallflowers who's joining the team sports but not really in it as much
hmm
would be the one not doing as well. So, I could see the team sports athletes doing really well depending on which category they fall in.
sure,
But you're right, like the ones who do the individual sports, especially a wide variety of them, um, they have a chance to always be developing because they're always participating.
yeah, yeah, yep, yeah. Good point. Um, okay, so we sort of hinted on this one, but I like to break it out separately, is sprinting. Kids running fast and developing those fast twitch muscle fibers. And I mean like as young as possible, and as fast as possible. And I don't mean structured sprinting. Like you get into middle school, sure. But I mean through play, but like actually running and running hard, like with excitement, especially for younger kids. But like I remember as a kid how freeing it felt to fly on your feet, just haul running, like whether it was from my dad or a friend or scared. I remember coming home through the woods in the back ravine scared at night because my friend went home and now it's me and I got to get home, So, yeah.
Hey, Josh, you're breaking up completely. I've got nothing here. I can't hear your voice anymore.
Okay. Am I back, buddy?
Yeah, you are back. Okay, there we
I'm
go.
back?
Yep.
Okay.
So I heard you start getting into talking about sprinting.
Sure. Yeah, I can revisit that. So let's jump back into that. Okay. Can you hear me, buddy?
Yeah, I can. You're a little choppy, but I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, with sprinting, I believe that is a huge importance as a kid to develop that maximal ability to run as fast as possible for short periods of time through play. I remember running like from my dad or friends or through the woods and developing those fast twitch muscle fibers. I believe translates not just for sports but just life in general. I don't see nearly as many kids now, like because they don't have recess, they don't have as much PE, they're not sprinting hard, 10, 20, 30 seconds where at the end you are smoked. I think there's a lot of value to that.
Yeah, I think so too. There definitely is. The last podcast that we did was on sprinting and the importance of it. And like all of the things we're talking about today, the earlier you start, the more likely it is you're going to be able to do it when you're, later on in life. I would say I wouldn't be giving the kids sprint practice as in like going to the track and doing 40-meter repeats or anything like that. I'd like it to come naturally, but as a part of a game, tag, when you're running away from your friend, they're sprinting after you as fast as they can. So you're sprinting away as fast as you can.
Yes.
Hide and go seek, you're trying to sprint to home base or whatever. Most sports, you're running after someone or running away from someone. So pretty much all sports and games that kids play, involve sprinting when they're played intensely, which kids tend to do. And I think that needs to be encouraged as much as possible. You always hear parents telling kids to slow down, slow down, stop running, walk. I know there's times that they have to, stop and walk, but like the more running that they can do when they're young, especially sprinting, the better.
Yeah. No.
And that,
go ahead, buddy.
I mean, I can play off that a little bit too, because one of the things that I talked about was plyometrics a little bit, or more specifically, like absorbing forces. So sprinting is one of those ways in which we absorb forces. Every time your foot hits the ground, it's absorbing a lot of force there. But jumping and landing, I'd like to see kids doing a lot more of that. It's so good for you to jump up onto something, jump down from something, jump over something, jump forward, jump backward, jump side to side. Can you hop on one foot in a straight line? Can you skip in a straight line? All these things I like to see kids doing more of. And, this episode is about strength training for kids, and parents wonder what sort of things should they be doing? Do I need to take them to Planet Fitness? What should they be doing? We're trying to highlight all of the things that you want to see your kids doing all day long. Like I said, absorbing forces. This is a big one for me because, like in our gym, a great exercise is the depth jump. And this one where you're standing on a box or a platform or something, and you jump off of it and land on your feet on the ground. And how many adults, like in our gym, we've got a 20-inch box. That's not even 2 feet. But if you put most adults on that box and told them hop off that and land on the floor, they'd hesitate and be scared and probably not want to do it, which is good. Their brain is telling them not to because subconsciously they know they're going to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
and that's just a 20-inch box, you know. But as a kid, you take a 10-year-old, you could put them on a 5-foot step ladder, and they'll jump off and land and just pop up and keep going. And it's not even, you know, a lot of people will say, oh, kids just, you know, nothing hurts them or whatever. But they're doing this all the time, this running and jumping and stuff, and they're learning to absorb those impact forces, and it's just so good for them. If you do that early, then you can be, again, an adult who isn't worried about hopping down off a 2-foot platform or 3-foot or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd, again, like to see a lot more kids doing these impact absorption kind of things.
That's a great point. I did have on here under my fourth section here for jumping.
Mm-hmm.
But when I started coaching quite a while ago, I was shocked at the number of adults that couldn't jump onto something
Mm-hmm.
and hesitated jumping off. They would more want to step off, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um and it blew my mind because at the time I was like a really young CrossFitter. You know, we were doing like 40 some inch box jumps and whatever, and then I have a 58-year-old female that doesn't want to jump on an 8-inch plyo, you know,
Mm-hmm.
step. It sometimes it was funny to them because they didn't realize
Yeah.
they had lost the cognitive ability and physical to jump, like
Yep.
literally jump. And then also, like I said, you're standing on the platform, and whether you're jumping off backwards or forward, their instinct is to step down or put the hand down and step down. They don't have that ability to jump. And I'm talking 8 inches. I'm not talking, you said 20 inches, but
Right. Right.
you know, even these smaller heights, our brains lose that ability, and kids too. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't jump and land, and like you said, those impact forces, you will never have that. You won't
Yep.
have it.
Yeah, it's really good for kids to experience a lot of impact force, and thankfully they do. They're always just falling down, like running
Yeah.
into each other, you know, playing games, tackling each other, falling over. But think about, like, you know, I'm 43 now. You know, we're both over 40, and like as you get older, falling down starts to hurt. You know, jumping down off of something, you start to worry, is this a little too high? Like, so get that practice when you're young. Teach your body how to absorb impact, how to like fall properly. I mean, there is like, I'm not going to say a technique to falling, but like you
Sure.
learn how to fall in ways that don't hurt you. I mean, that comes in really handy later in life.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. Yeah, for sure. Reaction time.
Mm-hmm.
Like last year, I was running on a trail and I stubbed my toe on like mile 5, and I was tired, and I face planted, but not really. I caught myself on my hands and then my elbows, and I tightened up. Right,
Mm-hmm.
like I took that 7-mile-an-hour blow as smooth as I could on a trail with roots. And I got up and I continued running versus breaking my nose or knocking my teeth out or, breaking a hip.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to absorb that. And you and I talked after I did that because I had some road rash type
Yep.
thing on my elbows, but I was fine,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. So I have a separate section here where we're talking about strength, and I have some movements for strength training. This would be more towards the 12 to 14 age. We don't need to spend a lot of time on them, but I think these are very important. Carrying. I think
Yeah.
carrying objects with kids, farmers carries, sandbags, I don't anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think carrying, whether it's from a functional standpoint in the garden to in the gym, is very important. From grip
Yeah.
strength to core strength to there's aerobic involved for sure if you go far enough, leg strength, balance. There's a lot to carrying.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, it involves your entire body. It's obviously functional. You got to carry things your whole life. Learning how to just pick up things that are oddly shaped, all really, really useful. You're always using different muscles and bracing your core. I mean, it teaches you how to use your body, which is what we're trying to do with young kids. You know,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I had written down was the goal of training kids. Like, what's the whole goal with this age group? And it's not just to get them stronger, like that, that's important, that's great. But I said developing movement literacy,
Mm-hmm.
which is just like how different parts of your body work, how to control different areas of your body, knowing where your body is in space, and developing coordination, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, all these activities that we're mentioning, things like just carrying things, um, kind of teaches you all that kind of stuff. You got to learn how to balance when you've got this weird shaped object that you're bear hugging and carrying around. Like, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Anything
And
that just teaches you how to be more coordinated and use your body better and be aware of it more is what I want to see kids doing. Yep.
For sure, 100%. The grip strength portion too is a little eye-opening now. Like, you and I developed our grip naturally just through all the stuff we're talking about here. But now this younger group of kids, there's not a lot of grip strength natural.
Oh,
And I see it. We have a grip strength thing here in my office where I just will give it to kids or, middle school, high school, and adults, but like
mhm.
grip is weak.
Yep.
You don't need rock climbing grip, but there are like you need a respectable grip, and now the research is showing how it's correlated to health and longevity.
Yeah, and I'd say the
um,
two best ways to train grip are either carrying things or hanging.
yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
which we've mentioned both of.
Yeah, my second one here is hanging for the
Okay.
strength portion of it. I think kids should be able to hang for 1 to 2 minutes. If your kid can't hang, there's a few things going on: weak grip, maybe shoulder stability, and then the other thing, and we're going to talk about this in the health section, but maybe they're just overweight. 70% of kids now are overweight or obese, and so that kid by default is going to be worse at hanging for sure. So
Sure.
put a 40-pound vest on me and you and have us do our max time as opposed to how we
It's
are
gonna be a lot
now.
less.
It's significantly different. So there's reality checks with lots of exercises that you and I like, where it's a self-checking mechanism where if your body is out of proportion, certain things are significantly harder, and hanging is one of those. And you may have a strong grip and you may have good, strong shoulders, but again, if you're 40 pounds overweight, maybe it's not the hanging portion, maybe it's the weight.
Mhm.
So
And I'll
I'm
touch on again that with kids, a really important principle is variety. You want to expose them to as much as possible. So you mentioned that as a standard, we'd like to see a kid hang for 1 to 2 minutes from a pull-up bar. But as far as like quote unquote training for hanging, get them swinging from monkey bars, just going across monkey bars and playing on them. Can they go sideways across the bar?
Yeah.
Can they go from one bar to the other? Can they go across the rings on the jungle gym? And what else was I going to say there? The variety. Oh, like climbing and stuff. Like, I used to love climbing chain link fences when I was a kid, up and
Me
over the
too.
fence, like
Yeah.
things like that. Exposing them to all sorts of different things that they have to hold on to that feel different, narrow bars, thick bars, tree branches. Some are thick and they got to like bear hug them. Some are like
Hmm.
smaller and they can wrap their whole hand around, like, and they're pulling from different directions. Yeah, to develop the grip strength and the hanging ability, have them climbing and hanging and swinging from as many different things as you possibly can. Variety is going
Yes.
to be a big theme in this, like
Yeah.
we've already
the
mentioned several times.
the Ninja Warrior courses,
Oh God, like that's one of the things I have written down in my notes is like the obstacle courses are a
yeah.
great thing to do. Like we do those in the gym when you have a little kid. The best thing you can do is set up an obstacle course, climb over
Yeah.
this box, go crawl under this, whatever.
Yeah.
But man, one of the best things that's happened in the last 10 or 15 years is this Ninja Warrior stuff.
Yeah.
Because there's Ninja Warrior and parkour gyms going in all over the place.
Hmm.
And I've seen some of them, and I would have loved to have had that as a kid. They look
Me
like
too.
so much fun.
Me too. Me too.
Yep.
There it's you want to talk about physical development. That's for kids. That's where that's
Yep.
at.
And it's extreme variety. It's boxes and platforms at all different angles and all different things you're hanging from and swinging from. So they're just
Hmm.
exposed to so many different things. The benefit of variety, aside from just hitting different parts of your body, that you wouldn't hit if you were just doing the same thing all the time, um, is that kids learn to move. When kids are younger, I don't think you necessarily want to teach them how to move, like exactly. You're not teaching them technique with like squatting and lunging and stuff. That comes a little bit later. When kids are younger, they should be learning how to move on their own. It's like kind of like problem solving. And if you have them doing things like these obstacle courses and stuff, you'll see them figure out their own tactics and techniques to get around things. And that's them developing their own movement literacy themselves by problem solving in the moment and actually learning how to use their body in real time, learning how to
Mhm.
best leverage and stuff. They're not thinking about it, but that's what's happening in their brain.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I love
Yeah.
all the lots of variety in obstacle courses.
Yeah. I call that like movement riddles,
Yeah, yeah, yep.
like you come up to a 3-strand barbed wire fence in a cow pasture and you have to get over it.
Mhm. Yep.
And yeah, there's lots of different ways you could do things. But yeah, it's a movement riddle. Yeah. So we talked about jumping. That was next on my list. That was my third for under strength. And then balance. We've pretty much hinted on that. But balance is developed at a young age. And you and
Mhm.
I have seen clients here that didn't develop that as young kids. And now we're fixing that or
Mhm.
attempting to. But balance is huge. Yeah, and again, it comes through play, sports. You can train balance separately for sure. But I think that with kids, they should be developing it outside and whatnot.
Yeah, with kids, there shouldn't ever really be too much instruction, especially when they're really
Yep.
young. It's just get them playing and they
Yep.
will figure it out on their own.
Yeah.
The
Yep.
less instruction, too, the more enthusiastic they tend to be, just running
Yep.
around doing their own thing. And it's incredibly beneficial for them.
Yes. Lastly, I have for this is more for middle school and then high school for sure, is stability positions.
Hmm.
So stability positions being like a side bridge, a plank, a Superman arch, all the body line drills that we do, maybe wall handstand drills, glute bridges, supports on dumbbells or rings. Um, Stability. So we're not moving through a range of motion, but we have the capability to stabilize our body, right?
Hmm.
Under our own load being our body weight. I think that's really important. And when we were doing so much work with Fit Kids, Fit Future in the schools, this is where it became really eye opening to me in middle school was how poor a lot of kids were stabilizing in a proper position for a period of time, certain exercises and patterns.
Yeah.
And if you can't, you and I know, if you can't stabilize, your movement itself through a range of motion is much weaker, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
Um,
bracing your core and creating a stable foundation is what allows you to use your limbs and actually produce force or do whatever you want to do with your legs and arms.
yeah.
But yeah, teaching kids how to yeah, like you said, this comes a little bit later. Maybe they're in middle school or whatever. But teaching kids how to just hold certain shapes with their bodies without being shaking and leaning over and being floppy in their core, which is what
Yep.
that's what I say in the gym, floppy in your core. We see
Yeah.
that a lot where kids can't just hold a stable position. Um, yeah, doing things like having them hold a position and throw a med ball to them, and they have to catch it without it like
Hmm.
moving them or causing them to fall over. Like that, it's good to teach them how to like ground themselves with their feet, create an athletic stance, brace their core. Like you said, planks, any of those kind of positions, just to learn how to create a solid foundation so you can't be moved.
Hmm. Yeah.
um, that's really that's really lacking in a lot of the young kids that we see at the gym.
Yeah. And also imbalances left to right. When we did that side bridge test with thousands of kids, it was amazing to see the differences from left to right. We would have a kid that'll get 75 seconds on his right side and 18 seconds on his left.
Hmm.
And, those imbalances start young. And unless they're addressed slash corrected, they come to us at 38 and, there's a hip issue and whatnot. So kids develop imbalances pretty young. Again, the concept here, I guess, is play and whatnot helps that. But doing some of these stability drills, you can actually see that yes, they are weaker in this pattern on this side.
Yep. Yeah. So comparing left to right. Yep.
Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen, made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body, found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. Type 1 and 3 fibers provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers. Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, soups, you name it. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without clumping. And the best part? Native Path offers amazing bundle deals. With this special link, you can get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 360-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a trusted choice. Plus, they offer an 800 number for any questions about usage, recipes, or ingredients, and you will speak to a real person ready to help. Visit getnativepath.com/co-movement and start your transformation today. That's getnativepath.com/co-movement. All right, the last thing I have under strength, and we talked about this, so we don't need to get into it much, and then we'll get into a few of more stuff. Functional work. I think like for kids, they do like this stuff, like gardening, projects around the house, basic farming stuff, working with your hands. Um, Obviously, this isn't like hardcore manual labor. We're talking 6 to 14, even though I think 14 you should be working at least pretty good. 13, 14. But like little things, like with Asher, like we bought him a small wheelbarrow a long time ago, like a
Yep.
kid wheelbarrow. And he loved that. He'd fill it with everything and push it laps around the
Mhm.
house and on the wood chip pile and this and that. That was a huge hit.
It's funny
Getting
that
the
those are all things we have to do as adults, and think of all the chores we have to do as adults that we really dislike doing.
Yep.
Um, but kids, if you let a kid go out and shovel the snow with you when you're
Yeah.
shoveling in the middle of January, they have a blast. It's so much
Yeah.
fun for them. It's not a
It's so
chore.
true.
Or
Yeah.
like you said, pushing a wheelbarrow, digging a hole in the yard with a shovel, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. So yeah, get them learning how to do all that stuff. They're gonna have to do it their whole life anyway, but create a good
Hmm.
relationship with it early, and it's phenomenal exercise too.
Well, you mentioned shoveling. That was that was next on my list. I
Really?
read an article last week. I don't know. This is on the internet, so you don't know what's true. But they had said that the gladiators and Spartans and all of that were given high volume projects and tasks with shoveling.
Hmm.
And it was because that movement pattern, if you think about it, I don't mean just like put it in the ground and step on it and that, but I'm talking about like when you're hitting like roots and like rocks and you're moving and you're actually aggressive with a shovel,
Mhm.
simulated wartime, violence. And if you think
Sure.
about that, and you've done plenty of it, as have I, it's absolutely true.
Oh yeah, no question about it, and it's brutal too. It's hard work, and
Yeah,
it's kind of similar to like how a lot of athletes will train with like sledgehammers and stuff.
yeah, yeah,
Sledgehammer against a tire, or people doing even just like cutting down trees with an axe, that kind of thing. Like
yeah.
very similar to shoveling.
Yeah. Yeah. Think about like if you had a spear
Yep.
and you have that thrusting motion horizontally or vertically if they're down,
Mm-hmm.
and now replace that with a shovel and a hole.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's very, very, so I laughed when I saw that, because I just planted 125 blue spruce trees, apple trees. Like, me, I work with a shovel a lot.
Yep.
But when I read that article, I thought that was cool. So kids like that, weeding is cool. I think it helps them. They're on their knees, they're getting up and down off the ground. They
Mm-hmm.
have to hinge, which takes low back strength.
Mm-hmm.
So something as simple as weeding. Digging in like a wood chip pile. We have a wood chip pile here always because we use it in the garden, but like that's Asher's and his friends like sandbox. They love the wood chip pile. Tools are in there and rocks, and they dig holes, and it's easy to dig the holes because they're wood chips.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get a free pile of wood chips from your town and they will deliver them to you normally for free.
It's a good idea.
Little things like assisting holding a ladder or wood. Like I remember my dad would have me hold like boards or a ladder or sheetrock for like longer periods of time, to where like my shoulders burned or my grip. And
Mm-hmm.
like he's working, he's either attaching something or moving something. So I have Asher do that kind of stuff. Moving hay. I was doing farm work fairly young. Basic stuff though. Hay, normally stacking and unloading. And then lastly, just picking up piles and moving them from A to B. A pile of stones. Like in the springtime, from the plowing, there's a lot of stones on the lawn. And so you rake 2-3 piles, which is a workout. And then you have to put the pile on a shovel, lift the shovel and put it in a wheelbarrow and move the wheelbarrow from point A to B. And then you repeat that. That's
Mm-hmm.
all a hell of a workout. There's no
Look at
one
the look at
muscle
the
group.
things we
It's
mentioned from
everything.
earlier that you're doing there too with the shoveling. There's a lot of stability. You got to be able to brace your core and lift that shovel out of the ground. With the dirt on it, it's held far away from your body because you're holding on to the end of the shovel, and the shovel head is away from you, and then you got to twist and rotate to throw it. Like a lot of planting your feet, again, being kind of athletic and stabilizing and moving from the core, and carrying things, like you were just talking about, like you got to scoop whatever you're shoveling and then carry it 15 feet and drop into the wheelbarrow. You get a lot of grip strength there. I mean, your hands are going to feel it the first time you shovel
Yeah.
if you haven't
Oh,
done it
for
in a
sure.
while.
Yep.
But some of the things I liked, like one of the tips that I had for parents was getting your kids involved in the active things that you do.
Yeah.
So that's all what we were talking about. You're talking about like you and your dad and stuff. But, if you're out there shoveling the driveway in February, get your kid out there with you. And if they're a little kid, they're not going to help very much, but that's not the point of it. Just let them run around with a shovel and do whatever, even if they're grabbing some from the snowbank and throwing it back in the driveway. They're getting good exercise.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And there's a piece too, I'll add to that. And I've done this with Asher and cousins and stuff, but I think there's a value, especially young, but at all ages too, of a struggle.
Oh, yeah.
So we see this, I call it like helicopter parenting, which I am not. I'm probably too far the other way. I let things play out as they should with safety, hopefully.
Yep.
But like, something heavy they have to move, or they're struggling, or it's hard, or maybe they start crying. Like, there's a lot to be said, like, to figuring it out. Again, make sure the safety metrics are in play. We're not letting them juggle knives, right? But I see this, and this isn't a judgment on parents. Like it's an observation, I guess, and it's probably from the heart that they want to help their kids as much as possible. But I do believe in standing back and just watching and observing and seeing your child struggle to figure it out. And maybe they will give up and maybe they'll figure it out. But there is a lot of value in that process.
Well, that's just, because struggle is where we grow, and if you just don't let your kids struggle against anything, then they're just not going to develop, those are the moments where something is happening. They're learning something, and like you said, sometimes they'll give up, sometimes they'll succeed, but those are all the learning opportunities that you don't want to take away from them.
No, and I remember so much of my childhood with things, and Will and I in the woods or in the backyard would be like so frustrated,
Oh
and
yeah.
we get another piece of rope or a lever bar or like, and we're just trying all these things. We could spend 2 3 hours on it, and sometimes things would work, sometimes they wouldn't, but that whole developmental process, I think, goes really, really far. And now there's all these books and everything and research on like kids lacking resilience.
Hmm.
They just
Hmm.
give up too easy.
Yep.
Maybe some of that was because you didn't, they weren't struggling enough, moving that big pile of snow.
Yeah.
Maybe they should have got frustrated and sat in the snowbank and pouted and then got up and continued to do it,
Hmm.
instead of going inside and saying, it's okay. Like, you tried your hardest. Like, there's a gray area. You don't want to smoke your kid.
Right.
But I think we could push a little bit harder, on
Yeah,
that.
and I don't even know if we like if we need to do the pushing. Kids will push themselves pretty well. Like when I was
Hmm.
young, like you said, you were out there for 2 hours with Will trying to figure out how to build this or whatever. Like, um, yeah, the kids get pretty hard headed sometimes and just struggle on their own, and but keep fighting, and that's awesome. Like let them keep going. Don't run over and try to solve the problem for them or take them away from it if you see them getting frustrated. Like you said, let it play out. And
Yeah.
sometimes it'll play out for a long time, and that's better than any PE lesson that they're going to get later on in life.
100% agree. Yes. All right, buddy. Anything else on strength before we dive into health you want to touch on?
Yeah, let's see. I might have a couple things here real quick. In my notes, I had written down some important principles. We already talked about unstructured play is really important. They create their own games. You don't even need to get them rules sometimes. Keep it fun was a big one. Like kids, if you're trying to train them or get them to do something, if they're going into the gym or whatever, like if it's not fun, then kids stop pretty quick. But so you're always trying to find things that light them up and get them excited. And massive variety was the other one. Expose them
Yeah.
to as much as possible. Um, with tips for parents, I had model the behavior.
Yeah.
Like you want your kid to be active and develop well physically. Hopefully, you're trying to be active as well and let them see you being active because you know you don't teach kids with instruction. You tend to teach kids with example because they're sponges and they learn so much just by watching you. My example from my life is just watching my dad do handstands in our living
Yeah.
room when I was tiny, and then I was doing them with him, or at least trying to, when I was in elementary school. I don't know when I did my first handstand, but it was in that living room when I was a little kid, just because I saw my dad doing it all the time.
Hmm.
Um, and he never taught me how to do a handstand, but kids just learn by seeing, and then they believe that they can. So try to be active yourself as a parent. Ride bikes, go for walks, go hiking, whatever. Um, you know, Shoot baskets in your driveway, but get your kid out there with you and let them see you doing it. Even if you just work out at home, if you have a home gym and you exercise, it's great for your kid to see that. Even if they're not using the exercise equipment themselves, they'll see what you're doing, and it creates a lot of good habits for them.
Hmm.
So, and then my other one was just, and we kind of touched on it already, but getting your kids into nature as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I talked about the variety that they need. And, we live in a world full of flat surfaces and, the floors in our house or our yard or whatever. You go out in nature and they're going up and over banks that are covered in mud. They're going through streams, like,
Yep.
going around trees and bushwhacking and stuff like that. So activities like camping are great, where you have them out in nature and they have all these opportunities for a weekend. Um, Hopefully, you can do that as much as possible with your kids.
And it's sad. So many kids now don't, they have access, I guess, ish. But if you look at like the cities and a lot of the suburbia, um, access isn't easy.
All right,
We live in, cow country up here in upstate New York, but
we're
like,
lucky to
so
have
that's,
that nature that
yeah,
we have around us.
it's all we know,
Mhm.
it's all I know. And so, yeah, it's, it is a challenge, I think, for a lot of the population to find access to those creeks and trails and this and that, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So if you
Um,
are like in a more urban environment, that's where like the playgrounds and the monkey bars and maybe a parkour gym or gymnastics gym or something is going to be even more important.
yeah,
That can help with some of the things that the kid would be getting if they were just out in the woods exploring. You know?
yeah. There's a book, the title, I think it's called The Last Child in the Woods. It's by Richard Love, Louv. So that the author is correct. It's Richard Love, Louv. I think it's called The Last Child in the Woods. I've read that a few different times, and it's eye-opening on how important, from a research standpoint and development, um, being in nature and in the
Yeah.
woods and
And
playing
I'll point out
is.
something else too, which is that it's not just the benefits that kids get from being in nature and being out in the woods, or even just being active in general, you know, playing sports in the backyard, that kind of thing. We've talked about all the benefits they get from this, but one of the other one is they're avoiding some of the really negative stuff. Because
Mhm.
remember, every 20 minutes that your kid spends kicking a soccer ball around the yard is 20 minutes that they're not sitting on the couch watching TikTok. You know,
That's true.
a weekend camping trip is 48 hours that they're not watching movies.
Mhm.
You know, so that's one of the big things here is the more of the stuff you can have them do, it tips the scales of the less that they're on social media or on their tablet or playing video games and doing the things that completely work against everything that we're talking about in this episode.
Mhm. Mhm.
I
Yeah,
think that's really important.
I didn't think about that. Yeah, you're filling your time with low priority items or high priority items.
Hmm.
And you're right. If it's not filled with high priority, it'll be filled with the other stuff.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you know, as a little kid, I was addicted to video games. I loved my
Yeah.
Nintendo, but you know, Nintendo was for rainy days. You know, it's fine. You're stuck inside. Okay, you can play video games. Nighttime, you know, it's too dark. You know, your mom called you in after dinner. It got dark out. She wants you inside. Okay, you can play some video games in the evening.
Mhm.
But during the day, my parents were like, "Shut that off and get outside and play." You know, I
Yeah.
think there should hopefully be a lot of that going on. I get worried that sometimes kids are allowed to just sit on a tablet or a phone when they could be outside, and they're not really being
Yeah.
encouraged to do the right thing there. You know.
Yeah. We're gonna talk about that in the health section.
Cool. All right. Well, we could transition then. Oh, you
Yeah,
know what?
that's
Before we do, just because we were talking about physical fitness, I just had a little bit about sports because you know kids are playing sports now and they start really early.
mhm.
Just a couple really brief notes. One of the things I worry about a little bit is too much early specialization. There was a study out a while back, but I think it's better for kids to be multi-sport. You know, play soccer in the fall, play basketball in the winter, play something else in the spring, ride your bikes all summer. You get, like we've already talked about, the importance of variety. You know, too much of doing just one thing develops you in that area, but you're probably missing a lot of things that that sport doesn't provide. And that can set you up for injuries too, as you
Yeah.
overdevelop in one place and not another. Um, and yeah, whatever study it was, just looked at, I think it looked at NFL players, and you would think that the pros, like in the MLB, NHL, whatever, they've just like committed themselves to that sport since they were like three.
Mhm.
That's kind of the picture that I always had. But more, I don't remember what the percentage was, but more pro athletes in I think almost any sport actually started as multi-sport athletes
Yeah.
for most of their youth, and they
Mhm.
developed so many skills through that variety that when they did start to specialize, maybe middle school or high school, whatever, they just had a lot better movement literacy, as I've already said, just better control and awareness of their body, and a variety of strengths that they could then bring to bear on whatever sport they're now moving into.
Yeah.
So it's not so critical, and I don't understand why parents are so focused on trying to have the best athlete they can. Like sometimes I think parents get more obsessed about how well their kids do in sports than the kids even do. The kids just want to have fun, and that's what it should be about.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes parents kind of push for this early specialization. Oh, sign them up for batting practice, sign them up for, throwing practice, get the special pitching coach, whatever, when they're like 6 years old, because they like want to get them to be as good as they can be at that sport when they're in high school, or maybe they'll get a scholarship, maybe they'll go pro.
Yeah.
Like, I'd like to see kids just exposed to a variety of things and kind of fall into what they like. The benefits of sports are that it should be fun. There's definitely the social component and the mental health piece there, and overall health. Like, don't be so worried about trying to turn them into the next, like, whatever pro athlete.
Yeah.
Genetics play way too big of a role in that anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And where you live, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
you and I could do a whole podcast on that actually. That's a really big topic.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Especially in today's world of playing these sports 365 days out of the year, and parent issues with coaches and playtime and referee issues and
Yeah,
just
I've really gotten
how
turned off
like
to youth sports lately, seeing mostly because of the parents.
yeah, like pounding the refs and the volunteer coaches that like work all day and then they go coach your kid and you scream at them because they're not
Meanwhile, the little
playing.
kid's trying to have fun with his friends
Yeah,
or her
yeah.
friends.
But they've lost. Yeah, you said it really well. Like, I think it's easy to lose sight of the reason behind it and the pursuit of health and happiness and development
Hmm.
over, I don't know,
Some
maybe
future
going
outcome,
to a shitty D3 school, like
right?
maybe, and then you don't play or make the team. Like, and again, I know there's outliers, and you and I know people that play D1 sports, and like we've
Hmm.
interviewed all these professional athletes. Like, so trust me, we get it. But the reality side is what we're saying is like it should be more about at all levels, I think, developing all the other stuff also.
Hmm.
And if there's an issue, sure, I guess, call it out if there's a verbal or physical abuse and certain things, there's outlier stuff with that. But
And
yeah, like,
if your kid is gonna make it to a D1 school or whatever, it's not gonna be because of something that you did with signing up
no,
for these things. Like,
no,
you can't push them into becoming a great athlete in the sport that you've chosen that they should do or whatever. The motivation has to be intrinsic from the
yep,
kid. And that
yeah,
means when they're young, let them play everything and just gradually fall into whatever they love. And
yep,
then just see where that goes, And if all they
yeah,
do is play a sport that they love and they never get a college scholarship, that's awesome. And
yeah,
if they happen to like manifest some talent and, I don't know, get a scholarship or something, great. That's a little bonus, but
sure.
you got to let it develop naturally from the kid, and you want them to have a love and passion for it. Like, don't push them, into
Mm.
extra practices and extra training sessions and whatever.
We've seen it time and time again here, with parents asking us about why their kids burnt out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, because since 4 years old, they've been doing this every day forever. And now they're a junior and you wonder why they don't want to do it.
Uh-huh.
It's just too much, but I would look at that as not a letdown. I would look at that as maybe we're peeling back a piece of an onion, a layer of an onion, and there's just something new on the horizon, or,
Mhm.
they're shedding that skin. Maybe they're being lazy, I don't know. Probably not in that situation, but like, think about, you and I, like if we overly obsessed with something forever and then at one time we get to a point in our life where like, you know what, we want to try something new, and
Mhm.
everyone around us was like, no,
Right.
you've got to stick with it forever because of this one giant
It's your
opportunity that
thing.
that doesn't really exist anyways.
Right.
And I'm sure this will flare a few people up and like whatever, but yeah, no, I think that's a great point. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting our sponsors, Native Path Supplements and Lombardi Chiropractic. Your support helps us to bring you 2 new episodes each month. See the show notes for more details and a nice discount from our sponsors. Thank you, and see you next time on the Co-Movement Gym Podcast.